Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. Later on, we're going to talk about cash for health care. You're going to like that one. But first, I don't know if you know, it's an election year. This young man wants to be your next state treasurer. Justin Everett, thanks for being here.
Thanks, John.
Anybody younger than me is young, so just deal with it.
I'm 46, John. I mean, when am I going to be considered an adult here? Yeah. Middle-aged. So I'm only that much younger than you are, I believe.
Yeah, but you have that much more hair, so screw you.
That's my parents, you know. So blame my parents.
So your parents are better than my parents. Is that what this is all about?
Your parents, I think, lived in my district in House District 22, down in sort of the Ken Carl area.
Yeah, Sheffield area. Yeah. All right, you're a state rep now, representing
House District 22, which is South Jefferson County.
And how long have you been doing it?
This is my 6th session, so 6 years.
You got another 2 to go. Why?
I do.
Why are you jumping ship when they need you the most to get the glamorous job of treasurer?
Well, when I started down there, Republicans were afraid of their own shadow, afraid to talk about things like fiscal responsibility. Republicans had just supported the healthcare exchanges and bringing Obamacare into the state. Things have changed. Our new leadership, and over the last 6 years, we've pushed new leadership, and now we have a good conservative opposition to what the liberals are doing down there with our minority leader, Patrick Neville, and Cole Wist, and Lori Sain, and Perry Buck, and our leadership team. And we see the caucus moving in the right direction. We're poised to take back the state house, I believe, this year.
Then why would you want to leave such an incredible, cushy gig and the big money?
The big money. Well, what else is there left to accomplish there? I think we're moving in the right direction. When I set out...
Do you think your House seat will be in safe hands?
It's a competitive House seat, but the person that helped me get there and stay there, with a lot of opposition from both the left, which is also considering some Republicans are to the left of me, a lot. It's something that Frank Francone, who I endorsed, is going to be able to do. And if I thought that we were going to lose my House seat, then I would have run for re-election. But I think we have the right person in there that should take the seat, and I think we're in a good position in the House, and things have changed. And if they hadn't changed in the House, I wouldn't be able to run for state treasurer.
There are 4 statewide offices. Everybody cares about governor. But the other 3 do some wildly important stuff. Our AG, our Secretary of State. The treasurer is probably the most functionary of all those roles. That is, you go in and you don't have a whole lot of freedom to change the world, to rule on cases or count up votes. You got to take the money and make sure it goes from here to here to there to there. What makes you good at that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the state treasurer does 3 things: oversees the unclaimed property office, also known as the Great Colorado Buyback, manages about $6 billion, B as in boy, in cash funds. And I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road, because an extra point return on that, and that's a lot of money. And then serves on the board for PERA, the Public Employee Retirement Association, which, according to people at the Independence Institute, may be as much as $83 billion underfunded. And John, you know the state budget's about $29.5, $30 billion, so almost 3 times the state budget.
And that's only with all the federal money. The general fund is about half that.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's go backwards on that then. PERA is the big issue. The next treasurer, there's a good chance that when it explodes, it could happen on your watch. Mm-hmm. Statistically, it might happen on the guy after you. Maybe it's a decade down the road before it completely blows up. But will you agree with me, it is completely unsustainable the way it is?
Yeah, I think it's completely unsustainable. I think, if it is $83 billion unfunded, and the problem is that I've run a transparency bill so we can see the books, essentially. And PERA has been not up front. Our current state treasurer, Walker Stapleton, sued to see the books. So until we actually get all the financial data to see how far and wide the problem is, we don't know what is the greatest solution, if there is a solution. But here's what scares me, and I've run bills on life and guns, which are considered controversial, and we'll get maybe 25 people showing up to yell at me because they disagree with me. We had close to 40 people testifying against my transparency bill on PERA. So when there's smoke, there's fire.
What exactly did the bill do? And hats off to Walker Stapleton trying to, the guy's on the frickin' committee and he's not able to look at certain aspects of the books, which is pretty insane to me. What did the transparency bill do?
Yeah, it allowed the one that I ran last year, allowed the state treasurer to see all the financial data, all the actuary tables, so what our outlays are and things like that. Stuff you really need to figure out how financially stable PERA is. The one that we ran this year did the same, allowed any board member, which is basic fiduciary duty. I have a law degree, I have an MBA. I mean, any corporate governance, people should be allowed to see this basic data. It also changed the board from 11 current or future PERA recipients, 3 Hickenlooper appointees, 3 gubernatorial appointees, and state treasurer, to more balance. So professional people like a tax attorney, someone with pension fund management experience, professionals that aren't interested.
Is it a conflict of interest to have PERA recipients on the board, or does that make it a better board because these are the people who are going to retire on that, so they want to see it succeed?
I wouldn't say conflict of interest. I just think that it's human nature that you vote your own self-interest. So I think kicking the can down the road, voting your own self-interest, having control of that board for so long, of course, the money's not going to run out. During the 90s, it's a boom time. Let's vote ourselves in extra benefits. And now we're looking at it with actual having PERA reform bills going through the legislature. We're looking at this conversation of what we need to have to fix it. But unfortunately, we may be so far down the road to where we're going to be in trouble. So we can't do anything.
Teachers have abandoned my children to take the day off. Instead of teaching them, go down and yell at you guys for not spending enough money on them, when in fact that's mostly a local pay issue, not a state pay issue. But they're worried about their pensions, their remarkably lavish pensions. The surveys and studies I've seen said in order to get the same guaranteed return that PERA, Public Employees Retirement Association, gives, and if you want to pay for it up front and guarantee those returns, you'd have to give every government employee at least a 25% pay increase, just so they could take that money and stick it into a guaranteed plan. And that's on the modest side. Mm-hmm. I agree with them. They should be concerned about their pensions, but I also believe they're wildly lavish. So as the fight is going to happen between, do the taxpayers foot the bill or do the recipients foot the bill, knowing that when other pensions have gone bad, you and I both had friends who worked for United Airlines, their pensions got cut in half and then cut in half again. We're seeing what's happening in newspapers with private pensions are getting slashed and slashed and slashed. Why should PERA be protected by taxpayer dollars rather than employee contributions?
Yeah, and that's the debate we're having right now, is who should foot the bill for this. And so, I mean, some of the proposals on the table are up the contribution for current employees, but it may be paying for current retirees. And even the Denver Post got it right last year in an editorial saying...
I like that, even the Denver Post.
Saying, I think they quoted one person who serves on the PERA board, which is a Hickenlooper appointee, said that it's become a Ponzi scheme. It's money in, money out. And that's just not the way you do investments. It's supposed to be building off that nest egg, and whatever return you're getting, you're supposed to be paying out benefits. And I think that's what the expectation has been, but it just hasn't been that way. The lavish benefits, being able to buy early years, for example, so you could retire early. Also, the retirement age is, much lower than Social Security.
58 or 57?
I think it's 55 at one point.
55 at one point.
So,
all right. Now, what they'll say is, wait a second, we don't get Social Security. To which I would say, please, let me not get Social Security. Let me have what you have. You've got to work to 62 and then to get full retirement 65. And by the way, pretty soon those age brackets will go up. There's no other way around that. Why is it that government employees in this state can retire in their late 50s?
Well, I mean, let's just look at the politics of it. It's buying votes, essentially. You're looking at the majority of people on PERA are probably in one party. You're looking at state public employees. You're looking at teachers that we see at the Capitol today and probably tomorrow. So it's sort of, I would say, almost like a buy-off for votes, is that we're going to give you these benefits. They're lavish, and you will vote for us. And I think that's what's been happening. The problem is that the bill eventually becomes due, and politicians always kick the can down the road beyond their shelf life. Your term limited out in 8 years or 16 if you serve in both chambers. 16 years down the road, maybe that's when there's going to be a reckoning where that direct deposit or check's not going to show up in your mailbox. So, there's no accountability there, but it's an easy way to, I think, buy votes, and that's what's been happening. And unfortunately, they've been lying to people.
What is it that, as treasurer, what would you advocate as a solution?
So first, I want to see the books, because I have an MBA in finance, and I like numbers, and it's kind of important. Then, we're going to have to look.
So as treasurer, you're going to keep the fight on just to be able to have you, a board member, be able to see complete transparency. 100%,
because we can't make decisions unless we actually see the numbers. And the fact that PERA is hiding these from us shows that there's a problem. And so that's step one. And then we're going to have to look at, whether it's a cut to benefits, which, no one wants to talk about, but we have to, consider that, because that might be the case. And you talked about United Airlines, for example. We hope it's not like that, but until we actually see the books and how deep and how wide it is, we don't know. But whether it's a COLA freeze for current retirees, whether it's averaging over the course of your entire life of service instead of your best 3 years or best 5 years, which I think is a proposal going to the legislature, there's a whole bunch of fixes that we can do. But again, until we see how big the problem is, or maybe how small the problem is, I'm going to side on how big the problem is in my experience. We don't know, and that's the scary part, is we don't know. So any sort of Band-Aid fixes, I would call them, going through the legislature right now, aren't really addressing the issue, and that's something we're going to have to do.
Let's turn it to politics. Right now, before you worry about your potential run in the fall, you may or may not have a primary, depending on what the courts do with Polly Lawrence, another colleague of yours in the House, whether or not her petitions get certified by a judge one way or the other. We'll find out. Assuming she's on, how do you win this primary?
Well, I think we start on do you want a fiscal conservative watching your money? I mean, something that you know about, John, is SB 267 from last year is a really cut and dry issue. That was an easy no for me. I thought it was a violation of Tabor. I thought it went completely against taxpayers and allowing the government to keep more money.
Let me bring folks up to speed for this. So 267, otherwise known as the hospital provider tax, they call it a provider fee in order to get around Tabor. It's now going to cost us about $600 million a year. The other great part of this is not knowing when this passed that the Trump tax code was going to change. And this is important. So when we do our Colorado state income taxes, we pull a number from our federal forms, and that number is going to go skyrocketing on the federal forms. Even though we're going to pay less in taxes, therefore less overall in taxes, you take that over, bring it over here. Ledge Council is thinking that that's going to bring in almost $900 million over the next few years. And by that vote on the hospital provider fee, opening up the room in the budget now for all that to come in. So not only are we in debt, not only is there a tax increase, but we also lose our Trump tax cuts. So unlike other states that get to enjoy what Trump did, we don't, at least not on those tax cuts. And for me, what was so objectionable is not only that it was a tax increase, not only that it was a $2 billion debt increase, but there's no public vote. I mean, even I don't like tax increases. I'll vote against them. I don't like debt increases. But if unless it's for something very specific, but I want to be asked. And how is it that so many Republicans sided with 100% of the Democrats in not asking?
Well, some of the rural Republicans, and this is how Democrats operate, is we're going to close your rural hospitals. There's going to be blood in the streets. I mean, literally, there could be blood in the streets. So I think that's how they got the rural Republicans on board, and it was tough for a lot of conservative rural Republicans.
Polly Lawrence is not a rural Republican.
But that's the thing, is that when you get into Metro Denver, in safe seats, where you should just stand on principle and say, look, government has enough of our money.
And $1 billion surplus.
So why would you support something like that? And it's been a little surreal to watch my colleagues over the course of the last 6 years. Few and far between now, but still on 267, there was a big shift. But I think there is a great sales job on why this is a great thing and why we need more money. And it was sort of a punt. And as you know, and you explained it very well, John, but to the average voter, it's the hospital provider fee, this, Tabor, that. I think they thought people would be confused.
Will you be able to get out the message to Republicans that this was a betrayal of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights and a tax increase without a vote? When Ref C and D came a decade ago, it went to the ballot, and people who pushed that, the Republicans who pushed it, their political futures did not live long afterwards. But this is different. I believe a lot of Republicans don't even know that there's this massive tax and debt increase because they weren't even asked to vote on it.
It's out there. Traveling the state, putting 50,000 miles or 55,000 miles on the car in the last year. Definitely, there's a lot of Republicans that know exactly what happened. Even those in rural Colorado that were told it benefited them realized this is a tax increase. Also, we mortgaged, about $2 billion worth of assets that we already paid for in the government. So it not only does that, but also puts the government into debt. which is concerning. But people know about
And by
that.
the way, once Polly makes it onto the ballot, if she does, I want to invite her here as well, just
Absolutely.
to be fair, and I want to hear what she has to say about it as well. All right, people want to get information about your campaign. Where do they go?
So website's the best way to do it. I actually check my email. When you email me through the website, everettforcolorado.com, EVERETTFOR Colorado.com, and that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Justin, thank you. Stay tuned.